Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I am so excited that you're here for this month's topic, which is all about body movement. If you have triggers around exercise, or maybe you have a hard time feeling comfortable moving your body in a particular way, or if you simply want to be more embodied, this month is for you. I'm going to be sharing how to think about movement in a totally new and different way that leaves you feeling sensually alive and grounded in your body. So come on, let's jump into it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey everybody, it is Mary, and today is the first episode in our brand new month's theme centered all around body movement. This is one of those themes that we'll probably keep revisiting on the Fully Alive podcast time and time again because it's that important. And it is just one of my favorite things to talk about because inevitably, if you turn on any kind of show that has to do with health and wellness, if you read any kind of holistic healing type books, there's always a section or chapters devoted to movement. And I think this is one of those areas that can be incredibly triggering. So I just kind of want to say that off the bat that I really get it. If it's triggering, that has been a huge part of my journey. And my story is just how triggering it has been to kind of learn how to want to move my body because there have been so many years, decades of really resisting movement. And yet there's so much research, whether it's emotional research, physiological research, psychological research on the benefits of moving the body. And yet there's a lot of shame around this topic. So if you're feeling at all a little trepidatious in having this conversation with me, just know that's really normal. And I think because it's been so insidious with the diet industry, it's kind of to be expected. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of shoulds. I'm just thinking about just the body standards that we have in our culture to begin with and sort of the unrealistic expectations for 90% of female bodies to look a certain way that we deem as beautiful or deem as ideal. And so the breakdown of that happens and contributes to our rejection, our resistance to movement. So we're going to slow down this conversation a little bit and kind of look at it through the lens of what it means to be fully alive in our body, in our mind, in our spirit. Because I think conceptually we can get, I want to be fully alive in my mind, in my emotions, in my relationships, all of that. And then we get into this realm of body and it's like, it gets a little messy. But the reality is that moving our bodies is one of the most powerful things that we can do to live fully alive, to be human, to be embodied here on this earth as a soul that gets to be in a physical body as we walk planet Earth. So let's take a look though first, what are the triggers? So we want to kind of understand what has contributed to this resistance or even to the opposite reaction where it's sort of like hyper movement, where there's no days off, there's no rest days. It's like, moving the body to burn the calories. So I think, like I said, if we start from the beginning, diet industry, the trigger can often come from crash exercising. Like the first time that we ever think about exercising, if we're not in a consistent pattern of moving our bodies, is usually linked to a kind of a program, a regimen, like a challenge, something to do with dieting. Like, okay, I'm going to start this diet and that includes going to the gym. We've got New Year's coming up here in a couple months. So even now there's like energy around it. So that's the first thing. We're triggered because it automatically feels restrictive because it's usually paired with restrictive dieting. So then secondly, we instantly feel that shame. We feel like we are not measuring up. So that kind of happens. Like we start talking about movement and you think about all the ways you're not moving. Oh, I should have done that yesterday, or I haven't moved in so long and I'm a failure and I'm just lazy and I'm just fat, and all those judgments that we bring into the conversation when we even mention the word exercise or movement. The third trigger that I see happen a lot is that there's this kind of rebellion against people telling you that you had to work out. So I don't know what your body image history and story has been, but I know that for me in the past, when I was younger, there was a lot of, in order to be loved, I needed to be fit. In order to be accepted, liked, that I needed to be at the gym. My parents were like cyclical dieters. Every so often they would start a new diet. And so in high school, I would just jump on the family bandwagon and do these diets. And I can remember, I think it was my sophomore, junior year of high school, and I would be at the gym with my parents because we lived an hour away from where I went to school and where my parents worked, where my dad worked, that we had to get up super early. And we would be at this like 24-hour gym at 4 a.m. I don't think I could even drive yet. I think I was like 15 years old. I was doing like protein shakes. I was like busting my butt at the gym. And that made me feel like, oh, I can be loved. So there's this rebellion that we feel sometimes against that kind of like, hey, in order to be loved, you got to work out. So we kind of have our middle finger up to all of that. So then the fourth kind of trigger I see is, and I can really relate to this, is like the lack of confidence in our coordination. The thought of moving my body, a couple years ago, the thought of moving my body in a free-flowing, kind of feminine, sensual way, like dancing or flowing. Oh my God. Like, are you kidding me? That would have been like, it would have made at that time. I'm still recovering from this, but it was so much worse. Like my skin would crawl. I would just be like, oh my God, it felt so exposing. It felt like it highlighted all the ways that I wasn't sexy or wasn't feminine, and it was terrifying. And I just felt like I had never been taught. I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian home, so we didn't have dances at my school or my church, and so I never got comfortable moving my body. So I always just sort of felt awkward in my own skin. So the thought of like, oh, I want to go do this new kind of movement, even if my mind was curious, I automatically came in with this conversation and the story around the fact that I felt like I was super awkward. I would look stupid. I would be embarrassed. People would think I had no right doing it. So that's a huge trigger that shows up. And then I think the last trigger that I see that I think is probably most relevant for right now, and let me know, y'all send me a DM on Instagram or message me on Facebook or something, because I've got to know. There's this feeling like, we're too tired. We are too run down. We don't have enough time. It's one more should. And it's basically like where we are in our lives, we're already over leveraged. We're already burnt out. We're already exhausted. So the idea of adding in something that requires exertion, extra effort, energy out is like, no. I have zero bandwidth for that. When I'm recording this is election week. And I don't know about you guys, but I have just wanted to like be in the bed with my covers over my head. It has been a real challenge to find the space to move my body. And we'll talk about kind of how that might look different this week than it would in a different week where there's less going on in the world and it felt less anxiety heightened and stress, crazy. It's going to look different. So those are some of the triggers. So as you kind of settle into this idea of body movement, and now maybe you don't have a problem with moving your body in one way, but maybe it's like, okay, you're great at like doing really hard, intense workouts, but the idea of going on a really slow walk feels like there's a trigger there. Like, oh, it doesn't count. Oh, I'm not burning enough calories. Oh, I'm not going for a long enough time. It could be that you're fine lifting weights, but you would never find yourself taking dance lessons. Just kind of examine and get curious about your own triggers and your own barriers, your own resistance to movement. I know that for me, so when I was about 240 pounds and I was at my largest, although sometimes I think I maybe weighed more than that, but that's at least the number I remember. But I can remember that like my husband at the time, he started walking. He would start walking every day, and he had gained a lot of weight in our marriage as well. And he wanted to lose weight. So he started walking, and y'all, I was so freaking resistant. I was almost angry at him. Actually, I wasn't. I wasn't almost. I was angry at him. I was like, how dare you shove this in my face that you are walking and I am lazy? Like, that's how it felt. That was the story that I was telling myself at the time. And I felt really angry, really resentful, really bitter to it. And it's a little bit like I dug my feet into the sand even deeper and was like, no, you cannot move me. I will not do this. And it took a while for me to kind of find like what it was that was my thing. And oddly enough, it was yoga. And this was a time when there wasn't plus size yoga, really. There wasn't yoga for everybody. It was still sort of the ideal, what you think of like California, Barbie, blonde hair, small waist, fake boobs. Like that was all of the demographic of the women, white, obviously, women who were going to yoga. And so for me, living in a larger body, it was like, oh no, the yoga is not the place for me. But thank God, I know y'all have heard me tell the story, so I'll spare y'all the details, but thank God I had a friend who invited me to go to a yoga class. And she said, Mary, she said, you know, it's okay. Everybody closes their eyes during the class. And I was like, okay. Thank God I had trusted her. I felt like I could get on board with that. But what was so powerful is that, yes, like when I went in and we closed our eyes, there was something that I would consider magical that kind of happened. Because what I didn't know that was happening was that by getting inside of my body and doing it in a way that felt restorative, felt gentle, it was like there was all of a sudden space. It wasn't about an achievement because I'd never really done yoga before, so I didn't have a prior association with it. So it wasn't about getting a sweat on. It wasn't about making sure I got X amount of miles in. It wasn't what my husband was doing. It was like my thing. And it was even more my thing because we closed our eyes. And so what I didn't know was happening was that I was accessing a lot of buried emotions as I was moving in yoga. And if you know anything about the practice of yoga, it is one of the most powerful movement exercises that you can do for any kind of PTSD. Because the body in our muscles and our tissues and our fascia store buried and undealt with emotions. And so what was so crazy is I started to kind of make this connection between, oh my gosh, when I move my body, it starts to release these things that I have not dealt with in a way that allows me to kind of complete the cycle of trauma or complete the cycle of stress or complete the cycle of anxiety. Like I move it out through the body instead of it getting stuck halfway through and I like push it down and bury it. I all of a sudden was able to move through it physically and get to the other side where it had been processed out through movement. And so it was so interesting. I ended up after that hiring a trainer and started working with him. And y'all, can I just tell y'all, I had to really have some humbling moments with him. And thank God I trusted him and it was a safe space. But I had a lot of emotional meltdowns in the gym, like crying, like almost like, where is this coming from? It's like, oh, I had a lot of emotional stuff that was buried in my fascia and my tissues and my muscles in my body that as I'm working it out physically, it's literally coming to the surface and I would cry it out. It was so healing. And this happens so often to people. I hear stories of people going to yoga or working and opening up their hips, which is a place in our bodies where we store a lot of trauma, that all of a sudden things that have been like keeping them stuck in this PTSD cycle, in this trauma cycle, in this depressive cycle, in this anxious cycle, all of a sudden it's like relief. Like there's literal breakthroughs happening. And so to me, if we are going to live fully alive, where we're not controlled by our unconscious, where we're not controlled by old past wounds and hurts, where we're not controlled by the things that we've buried and stuffed, our skeletons in the closet, we have to anchor ourselves into the body. The body is the key. The body is the answer. Over and over again, the body is the answer. And it's fascinating to me that most people, so if this is you, like just know this is super normal. I deal with this all the time, but most people cannot explain their own body sensations. Like if you say, for example, you have pain and I were to say, hey, like, well, what does that pain feel like? Most people say, oh, I'm not really sure. It's like they can't even get there in their mind. They can't even access like what the pain feels like, if it's dull or sharp or pinching or burning. It's like, I don't even know. I remember this happening in the gym my trainer was helping me isolate different muscle groups, like in my abdominal region. And I've had a lot of physical trauma in my uterus and in my abdominal region. So I've got a lot of scar tissue already there. I also have a lot of just buried trauma that was there. And so I remember being like, I can't even feel that part of my body. It's almost like my receptors were turned off to that part of my body. But over time, I was able to connect with my physical sensations. And the amazing thing is when we move our bodies, when we like enter into this relationship with our body, all of a sudden we start tapping in and tuning into the language of our body so that we like feel the twinge of a headache before it becomes a migraine, or we feel like an energetic block somewhere in our meridians and we can rub it out before it turns into like physical pain. We can rub our stomach in an area before it turns into constipation. We can tap into the fact that we need to stretch in a particular area to release an emotion. I mean, it's just amazing to begin to sense and feel our bodies in a whole new way. And there's nothing that I think helps that quicker than being embodied and allowing that body to move. So being anchored in the body is powerful. Tara Brach says, sensations in the body are ground zero, the place where we directly experience the entire play of life. So getting into the body helps us realize that our bodies are actually processing what we have maybe been cognitively avoiding. Like our physical body is how we experience life. I think Danielle Laporte, she says, your body knows before your mind does. It's like when you walk into a room and you sense that like, ooh, something's off here, like that icky feeling, that weird feeling, like you pick up on energy that there's some kind of vibe going on and you can't quite cognitively get there. You don't really know what it is. You have no proof other than just some feeling in your body or the pit in your stomach, or all of a sudden you start sweating, or you're all of a sudden in the middle of nowhere, your heart starts beating really, really fast. It's like, these are all signals and communication from our body that's helping us tap into something's going on. Our brain's offline for a second, but our body is so sensitive that it's picking up on that. So our physical body, like I said, it's how we experience life. And when we can get into our bodies, when we can move freely, oh my gosh, like a whole new area, a whole new experience of life opens up to us. Hey y'all, I'm sure you've been hearing me mention my Fully Alive Circle membership, and you might be wondering what it is and how you can join. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So the Circle membership is a safe place for women to gather together in a heart-centered community to take this deep dive into personal transformation. So it's my online membership where you'll learn how to find yourself again through daily devotional practices. Inside of our private Facebook group, I share resources like guided meditations, yoga practices, essential oil recipes, journal prompts, and so much more that dive into our monthly topic that we explore right here on the Living Fully Alive podcast. And all those resources are delivered to your inbox weekly to help you create powerful change in your life. So if you're looking for an affordable way to continue your journey of living fully alive, then definitely check out the Fully Alive Circle membership. Just go to maryhyatt.com/circle and you can find out all the details and join. All right, now back to this week's episode. Because otherwise, like for me, and I'm sure y'all can identify with this, when you're feeling awkward in your body or not confident in your body or shut off or numb to your body, like there's only so much you can experience. Like if you're all in your head, that is honestly sounds like such a stressful place to be, where you're overthinking things, you're ruminating on everything, you're constantly like in that fear loop or anxiety loop or stress loop in your mind. And it's like you just are thinking the same thoughts over and over again. And usually what snaps you out of that is your body, getting into your body, going outside and walking barefoot on the earth, shaking it out, stretching your hands over your head and shaking it out, using sound from your body, like, viscerally get it out, changing your physical state changes your mind. And that's why the physical body, that's why moving our body is so important. And I'm not just talking about exercise. So I want to be really clear that this month is not about exercise. I think we'll cover that for sure from different angles. But what I'm talking about is just like moving our body. Typically when I see people, when I look at them, like physically lay eyes on somebody, and it's almost like they look like maybe their face moves a little bit, but their body is almost frozen. Like they're locked up in their chest, their heart. You can tell their shoulders are raised towards their ears, and they're just sort of holding tension in their neck and their shoulders. Maybe they feel rigid. It's like, oh, that is a real deep mirror to somebody's psychological state. How we hold our bodies, how we move our bodies. Like if we're in a free-flowing state in our physical bodies, it's going to be mirrored in our minds as well, in our energy as well. Just kind of think about that for a second. You might even just choose to take a moment and scan your own body. Notice where you are in this moment, feeling a little tight, a little tense. Any areas that you might be holding. Any areas that you feel constricted, restricted in. Seeing if you can, for a moment, like wiggle it out. like wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I wish you guys could see me do this. Wiggle it out for a second. See if you can just kind of like shake your body a little bit. Let it all shake. Let all that fat shake. And see if you can kind of, using the breath on the exhale as well, shake it out. Release and soften. Soften, soften, soften. See if you can let go of some of that tension. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't even know I was carrying all that. Like there's so many times where I'll be like hunched over, my chest is tight and constricted. And the minute I roll my shoulders down and back, lift my heart, soften, sometimes that makes me cry, honestly. But sometimes it's just like, oh, God, wow, I'm more stressed than I realized. Like, even if I wasn't able to admit it mentally or emotionally, my body sure as hell knows. Like, it is showing me very clearly what is happening between my ears. And so it's like, good. It's like, oh, okay, let me get back in my body. Let me ground. Let me center. Let's take some breaths. Come back, come back, come back. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bessel van der Kolk, who is the author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which if you haven't read that book, y'all grab it on, I almost said Instagram, grab it on Amazon, and The Body Keeps the Score. And it is a phenomenal book about this whole thing, about how our brains and our bodies are connected and how we can move through emotional issues and trauma and whatever else through using our bodies. So he says, we do not truly know ourselves unless we can feel and interpret the physical sensations. We need to register and act on these sensations to navigate safely through life. While numbing may make life tolerable, the price you pay is that you lose awareness of what is going on inside of your body. And with that, the sense of being fully, sensually alive. Like, you know that saying, stop and smell the roses? Imagine walking through life, and this is probably what most of America and the world does, is they walk through life going through the motions. Everything is automatic. Everything is autopilot. Everything is just a rehearsed reaction from the day before. And there's no pausing to feel the body on the chair. Check in to notice again, what's tight, what's tense, what's holding, what's restricted, what's constricted. And we're not noticing what we're smelling, what we're tasting, what we're feeling, textures on our body, wind on our body, sun on our face. You know, it's sort of like we're just like, unless something's extremely painful, we're probably not thinking about any of those sensations. But then on the flip side, imagine just for a moment walking through life and like experiencing the pleasure of smelling the smells around you. Experiencing the taste of the food that you eat. Like, oh, this is so delicious. Like rolling it around in your mouth a little bit. Really tasting your food. Imagine if you could pick up on what you're holding in your body and go, ooh, let me adjust in my seat, or let me stand up and walk around for a minute. Let me stretch for a minute. I'm feeling tense. All of a sudden, it's a completely different experience of life. It's like black and white to color. The body is our gateway to being fully sensually alive. I love that. So when we are numbing, unfortunately, we miss out on the play of life. So I want to share with you 3 ways to reconnect to moving your body. So the first way is to understand your motivation for moving your body. So we have to start at our past. So it's like, what have we been doing? So what's been our motivation for working out in the past? Or what do you think the purpose of it is? Now, again, these are kind of our sticking points that make it miserable or to keep us from doing it. So what we're on the lookout for here is those triggers, those interpretations, those stories that we're telling ourselves about moving our body that are keeping us from doing it. Kind of like understanding our motivation. It's a little bit more like understanding our demotivation. What's demotivating us from doing it? Because you might be thinking, okay, well, it's just to lose weight. It could be to punish yourself for what you ate the day before. It could be a need to feel sexier. It could be this feeling of, okay, if I move my body, I'll somehow lose weight. I'll look better in my bathing suit. But when we're in that kind of demotivation, where we're viewing it as punishment, like, we're adults. Nobody wants to be punished. And that's usually how we view moving, how we view exercising. So when you're there, and you're going, okay, am I thinking of it like punishment? I mean, you can probably easily answer this. I think the first is, if you don't enjoy moving, you're probably doing it from a place of punishment. When it's not something that you look forward to, it's probably something you're doing for the wrong reasons. You could be using it as penance for your quote unquote bad behavior yesterday or last night, thinking that you can sort of undo that bad behavior in the gym. You put this morality on it. Working out the calories, flinking out the flab. And so that idea of punishment, when you get into the gym and you move, let's say you are in the gym, but you're berating yourself, you're shaming yourself, you're comparing yourself, you're working out beyond what would be considered like enough, like you're kind of going to the extreme, you're doing 1 or 2 or 3 workouts a day, like, okay, hang on a second. What's behind that? Because whether or not you're doing it or you're not doing, you're either moving your body in an extreme fashion or you're not moving it at all. Even in the in-between, what's the motivation or demotivation here? There's a beautiful book that I love. It's called When Women Stop Hating Their Bodies. And the author says, we engage in exercise that aims as weight loss as punishment for not looking like the models in the fashion magazines. We then rebel against that punishment because we also long to be accepted as we are. So there's a rebellion that happens. Eventually you're going to rebel. If it's only for weight loss and to compare yourself to others, eventually you will rebel. But I truly believe that we can shift this. I really believe, and because I'm living proof of this, that we can move our bodies in a different way for other reasons, for pleasure, for endurance, for strength. And we can find things that we actually enjoy so that it can sort of stop being a punishment, so that we can stop rebelling and that we can begin to partner with our bodies. It's changing our mindset around this idea of exercising. It's amazing. So if you're stuck in this feeling of feeling guilty for not working out, or if you're binging on working out and then you stop, it's a great indicator you're probably in that diet mentality thinking. Moving your body, to me, is like, I've gotten to the place in my mindset where it's not optional, in the sense that it's like, and I don't mean that in the extreme diet way, like I have to work out. It's like, no, this is just part of my life. Like this is who I am. It's what I do. I move because I'm a human being, and human beings were created to move. And I know that when I move, I'm connected to my body that allows me to live fully alive. Like I've created a new motivation because it's not a decision anymore. It's not like I'm waiting around for a result and only doing it for a short amount of time. It's like, no, this is what I will do for the rest of my life. Like I want to create this scenario where I'm going to move forever. And that's going to change based on my curiosity or where I'm at in my life and timing and all of that, seasons of life. But like, I'm always going to move because that's who I am. So exercise should, and this is sort of a gut check, exercise should rejuvenate you rather than exhaust or deplete you. It should rejuvenate you rather than exhaust or deplete you. Like, okay, let's check in. Is it taking from me or is it giving to me? Exercise should enhance your mind-body connection. It should help you get into your body, process through your emotions. Exercising should alleviate your stress rather than amplifying your stress. That's a big one. And that it should also provide genuine enjoyment and pleasure. Okay? Genuine enjoyment and pleasure. So this is where we get to go on to the second way that we can reconnect to moving our bodies. And this is when we identify our preference. If we're going to enjoy this, if we're going to find it pleasurable, then what forms of movement fit in that category? Get to know your exercise. Get to know your preference. Because when we think about exercise, oftentimes we have a category of like good, better, best. Like, these are the things that I should be doing. This is what I'm seeing on Instagram. This is what I'm seeing on YouTube. This is what I was taught when I was, doing aerobics back in the day, in the 80s, whatever it was. It was like we kind of have in our mind sort of a predetermined list of things that count, that are okay, that are worth it. And then we have other kinds of movement that we probably don't even consider on the list that would even quote unquote count. So for example, like I think about, and I teach a lot of my students and clients about micro movement. Have you heard this term? I don't know if I made this up. I don't actually even know. But this is like we can ease in with micro movements. It's not an all or nothing. It's about these small little movements to baby step our way from that trigger response. So the goal of a micro movement is to get you out of this outcome result minded desire and helps you think of movement as embodiment rather than exercise, like for a goal, for losing weight. It's like, oh, I can have a preference in moving in different ways. It doesn't mean I've got to like burn X amount of calories or hit X amount of miles. So micro movement could be like sitting at your desk and rolling your neck around. Check, that counts. It could be going outside in between calls and walking the block up and down just like 1 or 2 times. It could be walking around when you're talking on the phone or you have a client call. It could be standing up and stretching every hour. It could be parking at the back of the parking lot and just having a little bit further to walk. Like, that's a micro movement. But we want to get to know your preferences. So think about, like, do you enjoy working or moving alone or with people? Would you rather meet somebody and socially distance and do like a little, 6-foot walk together? Would you like to do an outdoor exercise class that's socially distanced right now? Or when all this is over, kind of go back to just, being in workout classes together? Or do you enjoy doing it alone? Does it feel like time for you? Or you can throw on a podcast and you can take a walk, or you can put on some crazy music and dance like no one's watching. Do you prefer indoors or outdoors? And that might change depending on the season, but some people really want to be outside. Like, I know for me with the seasons in Nashville, you couldn't pay me enough to go walk outside in the middle of the heat and humid in the summer. Like, not going to happen. So I prefer to be indoors during that time. So this is where, as you slow down to think, like, if there were no rules, because we all think we have rules around movement. If there were no rules, what would I enjoy? Where would I find pleasure? What would it be fun? And this is where we have to release the rules. That it doesn't count if we aren't sweating. It doesn't count if we don't burn a certain amount of calories. The goal in movement, as opposed to exercise, is connecting with your body. That is the journey, connection with our body. And this can be a real intuitive process. So we've got to separate this idea of it having to be for weight loss. Because again, if we're doing this for the rest of our lives, moving, being embodied, then it's totally different. So I want to ask you a question. If you did it simply for the love of moving, what would feel amazing? If you did it simply for the love of moving, what would feel amazing? This brings our body back into balance when we can really appreciate its preferences. We can kind of hear its vote and say, you know what? That's good enough. I'm going to just start there with this micro movement. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be what I used to think exercise needed to be. If I did it simply for the love of moving, what would feel amazing? So that is the second way of reconnecting with moving our bodies, identifying our preference. The last and third way is to take time to reflect. So we've got to experiment with this because sometimes it's been a while, we don't know, and we got to test it out. We got to see. Like, I think life is just feedback. It's like I constantly say, it's like throwing spaghetti up on the wall and seeing what sticks. So if you've had a lot of resistance to moving your body, then F all the ways that you've done it before and start trying new ways of moving to see what you like. It was like when I, was brave enough to go into that yoga class at one of my heaviest weights as a plus size woman and realizing that this was what my soul was asking for. This is what my soul was asking for. I got out of my own way and answered the call of my soul. It's how I feel about hiking. I love to hike, but I have feedback that I don't love it when it's strenuous. Like, I don't like to hike as a competition or hike as an achievement. I like to just really be able to go super, super slow. I love boxing, but I hate biking. Sorry, Bentley, if you're listening, my boyfriend, he loves to bike. I don't like to bike. So you want to reflect, experiment, and then assess. So as you're moving through this and you're trying out new things, ask yourself, how does it feel in the moment? Like, pause, ask yourself, are you trying something new? Say, okay, does this give me energy? Does this stress me out? Is this helpful for processing my emotions? Like, how does it feel in the moment? And then ask yourself and assess, how does it feel afterwards? How do I feel after I do it? Because sometimes I know for me, like, I love doing some hard stuff. I do a lot of working on trying to get my handstand. I haven't fully done it yet, but I'm very slowly, a couple years in, getting to the point where I can maybe almost do a handstand. And in the moment, I don't love it. Like, in the moment, it feels hard. It feels vulnerable. It feels challenging. But afterwards, I feel like a badass. It's like, yes, I love this. So afterwards, how's your energy? How's your mood? How's your stress level afterwards? Like, I know sometimes I don't want to go to the gym, but by the time I'm done, I feel freaking fantastic. I love it. I love feeling strong. I love feeling like I've overcome something. I love feeling confident that I showed up for myself. I love that feeling of being an advocate for myself. Even when I walk, it's like, I love that feeling because there's no agenda other than just to move. Like, I'm not tracking my steps. I'm not checking my heart rate. Like, I'm just kind of going until I don't want to go any longer. I love that. I love feeling that freedom to just sort of like intuitively click in and move my body the way I feel for as long as I want to move it and then go home. Like, there's no expectation there. I've, again, released and removed the rules that I maybe previously had where I just wouldn't have done it at all if I couldn't have gone for an hour. It's like, no, 15 minutes doesn't count. But now it's like, no, I got 15 minutes. This would feel good. So experiment and then assess. So I think in conclusion, what I want to encourage you is to be gentle with this process. We've got a whole month together. So start slow. The entire purpose is to intuitively listen to your body. Or another way of putting it is like to partner with your body. Because sometimes we need anti-movement, and that's just as healing as movement. Like, if your typical routine is to go, sometimes the most healing thing you can do is actually not move. So this is where it's like, it's not a one size fits all. There's no program that's going to hit every person. This is really about you tapping in and asking your body, what do you need today? Body, what do you need today? Not like, what am I in the mood for? But body, like, what do I need? Like, I have had so much freaking anxiety through the election this week. And I've had to move a lot more than normal, but I've also needed to sleep a lot more than normal, both. Like, I've taken a nap the past 3 days. I've gone to bed at like 9:30, which is way early for me, the past couple nights. Part of moving my body was yesterday I worked out in the morning really hard. And then I went on a really gentle walk. Like I needed to move my body because I needed to complete that cycle of anxiety and stress. It was like I felt so much more powerful in my body once I moved it, because I wasn't just like sitting in the vibration of anxiety. I got to work it out, literally like work it out through my body. It felt amazing. So above all, you can begin to think of moving as exercising out of a place of love for yourself versus to receive love. Out of a place of love. Like, how do I want to love on myself today? Is my body asking to stretch? Like, am I feeling really tight? Do I need to stretch? Do I need to roll out? Do I need to do some like restorative yoga versus like sweat yoga? I mean, that's kind of stuff we're talking about, is getting back into our bodies. So we're going to talk more about this. We're going to dive more into this in the coming weeks. But this is sort of our foundational episode. So let me know, comment on Facebook, comment on Instagram. Let me know how you guys are choosing to move in a way that's different and new than how you thought about it before, in a way that includes that sensory piece, the senses coming back alive inside of your body, processing through some of these emotions. What does that look like for you? I would love for you to share with me. So y'all, I'm excited for the next few episodes. I almost wish we could just like hop right into it. This feels like a whole masterclass I could get into. I've taught workshops on this before, but we're going to have to wait for one more week. So hang in there. And until then, remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. All right, y'all. I'll talk to y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.